Good day everyone, and welcome to this week's vlog. I'm not sure what we're going to get up to this week, but we've had some interesting weather. I shared snow with you last week, but we're going to be getting down into single digits this week, so we'll probably have a fun icy shore, and I can share with you what our beach and shore does when the temperatures drop into the single digits Fahrenheit, and probably do some artwork. And I've been itching to get back out into the garden, so maybe we'll do something with that. All right, let's get started with this week's video. So this week I felt like making an arrangement of perennials, and normally I take heucheras in for houseplants, which are an outdoor perennial. I usually take a couple in for a houseplant, and then when I was out in this little bit of the garden here, which is out by the boathouse and near my chickens, I saw that some of our dusty millers, cinerarias I believe they are, were looking quite well. Now cinerarias or dusty millers are actually sold around here as annuals. You get them in the spring and summer in little 6-packs, and people really do treat them as annuals. They just toss them at the end of the year. But I find they do quite well in our winters. So I thought, why not bring in a few, 2 or 3 of them in, these by the little pear tree I planted, and make a little arrangement with the heucheras I already have inside, and trim these up, these cinerarias, and make a nice little indoor planting flower arrangement. Now look how healthy those roots are. And it's funny to think that many people just toss these at the end of the season. So I just really like the color of them. Now this little garden area here I just took over last spring. It still looks quite a mess, but that big pile of rocks there and the tree stumps are because this past season we had to dig a large trench, which you can see the lawn's all torn up in front. My husband had to dig a 100-foot length hole from the boathouse well to the main house to fix the water, which we've been putting off for Bunny Hall for some time, and it finally broke this spring and we had to deal with it. So I'll deal with this garden sometime in the future. That'll be some fun vlogs. But for now, let's take our cinerarias and go to the terrace and make an arrangement for inside. Now this is one of the heucheras that I've brought in. I love heucheras. They do really well in the shade, obviously, so I have them in my shade garden, although the deer do eat them, so I have to protect them. But I have some plant food, and I also have some leftover. I bought some inexpensive bulbs that I didn't plant in the ground in the autumn that I set aside specifically to use for this type of a fun. You can see it's starting to sprout. Now I kept these in the garage, and just so that they would be in the cold, and they're really tough plants, and I noticed that they were starting to get their little buds, so I thought, let's take a darling little planter. Add some. Now I'm using seed starting mix, which I also mix with a little compost. And then this is some of my espoma fertilizer I use outdoors. So I took the pretty heuchera, which has that lovely sort of pinky maroon shade. I thought it looked nice with the sort of apricot colored glazed pot I was using. So we'll put that in here as the centerpiece. And then I dug the 2 cinerarias. So we will put those in. Now, you think 2, I like to do things in 3. So I was considering if the heuchera is the 1, then the 2 cinerarias or dusty millers would be the 3. But I might change my mind and add a 3rd one. But here I'm just trimming off the bits of the dusty miller that just looks a little bit bedraggled. It's all quite healthy. And of course it gets really tall. If I had kept it shorn at the top, it would have stayed shorter as it is when you first use it in the season. But they were just sort of neglected because they were out by the chickens by my little new pear tree I planted. So I really thought, let's bring these colors in, because I think that this color of the dusty miller next to the apricot pinky maroons of the heuchera, and then the sort of taupey apricot colors of the pot I'm using, I just thought they'd be really lovely. And then I like the hopeful thought of putting in the daffodils, which, probably in maybe 3 or 4 weeks inside, they'll start shooting their way through. And then this arrangement, this houseplant arrangement, or perennial arrangement, will become a new type of arrangement because there'll be little thoughts of spring popping through. And so I'll just pop as many of these as I can really cram in there, and then give it a good water as well. I'm really going to just stick as many in as I can. I find that these sturdy daffodils really, I've left some years without realizing it, just forgot that they fell in the back of a box or something, and they will grow and grow. They just really, really want to grow. So I'm going to really fill this container as full as I can. And I'm just going to top it off with a bit more soil. And I really like this idea of an arrangement being made with living plants. However, rather than doing houseplants, I thought having perennials is just a more hopeful arrangement right now, because I'm really looking forward to summer, and spring isn't even come yet. So the thought of having heucheras and dusty millers growing in the house, and then some daffodils poking through, it just seems like a fun collection. And of course I'll probably do sketches of it. It'll probably end up in one of my paintings. And then I always keep some of this preserved moss lying about. Now, I actually do collect moss in our own woods, natural moss, but what's nice about this preserved moss is you don't have to keep it as damp, and yet it looks quite like a real moss. So I just kind of place this around to decorate it and make it look as lovely as it can, and it'll be really pretty when the daffodils start coming through. So, simple, but there we go. So after all, as you can see here, I went back and dug up a third cineraria and stuck it in, because I really felt that, you know what, those dusty millers needed those three, and then the heuchera at the front, and then when those daffodils come through, I think it'll be really lovely. And I've decided I'm going to keep this on a round table there's a main window that I sit in front of each morning when I read my vintage magazines and have my morning tea. It's usually not this bright. Actually, when I wake up, it's dark out, and I watch the sunrise through this window. But this little area here, this little low coffee table, is right in front of, there's a sofa just behind where the camera's sitting, that I sit each morning and have my tea and read my old magazines or whichever book I happen to currently be on. And this is my view to watch the sunrise. And so I thought being able to see this pretty little arrangement of perennials and then hopeful daffodils will be really lovely. I thought this week's video I'd also share my love of vintage magazines. Each morning I get up and I read a vintage magazine with my morning pot of tea. And when 2020 started, that meant I was doing 1920s. Since then, the world's changed vastly, and I've moved through the Depression and into the early war years, and it's amazing to me how drastically the magazines have changed from the 20s, the 30s, and then into the early 40s. Better Homes and Gardens is the particular magazine I'm talking about, and the people who had tried to move away from an agrarian society in the 20s, building homes and trying to become a new middle class. They cared more about formal gardens, flowers, and trying to live that more middle class lifestyle. So many of them wanted to forget their farming background, the agricultural trappings, but they are having to find them again during the war years with victory gardens. I found an article about sprouting soybeans, which I talked about briefly on my Patreon video. I found it really interesting. If this is something that's of interest to you, I could try to scan it possibly and maybe share it somehow in my posts here on YouTube or on Patreon, I'm not sure. But I thought it was really interesting because we do this today, and I really thought that was a modern concept. And then I also, in the other magazine, something again that I think people would have wanted to forget as they were moving in the 20s away from the cultural landscape, is growing veg, all the details of growing vegetables, as well as keeping chickens, which this is the first time in this magazine through the 20s and 30s I've seen anything about keeping chickens, because now during the war years, people are trying to think, how can we keep a small flock of chickens? And this is about how to keep a small flock of chickens in a very suburban or urban area. So I just find it interesting, the American history during the 20th century, how after World War I we had that growing bit of the new middle class, a new type of middle class, you know, a middle class that existed prior to that. It was more of the educational, professional class. But now we have a new type of middle class forming after the war years, which really happened after World War II. So they wanted to kind of forget that in the 20s. But now by the 40s, they're talking about keeping chickens and how to pickle things and how to grow sprouts so you can have food in 3 to 4 days. So it's quite interesting, and it's also very prevalent to how I feel about our current world. You know, we have to keep a happy face on things, which I think is really important. But I also think it's pretty important to try to know how to grow at least a little bit of our own food. So I just thought I'd share that little bit, and I shared it with my patrons that I've moved into the 40s with my vintage magazines, because they are talking about more relevant things that I feel I'm thinking about now, more about keeping animals, which I've always done anyways, and more vegetables rather than ornamental gardens, which I obviously still want both. But I just think in these current times it's important to think about that with so many more people moving into the country as well. So, all right. Well, I thought this was a fun little tidbit, and it was happening during the week, and I wanted to share it in this week's vlog. All right, let's get on with the rest of whatever this vlog is going to be. So you can see we have some new visitors to the house here. I hatched out 5 new quail chicks to add to my collection, and hopefully at least one of them will become a bosom friend of Una, but we shall see. They're already getting quite big. I know they look quite tiny, but when they're born they're about the size of a bumblebee, and they're already getting their little pin feathers on their wings. And I've noticed they're not quite as friendly as Una was. I think because they have one another to chase each other around. Una was always so friendly because I was the only thing she really knew. So I have tried to see if at least 1 or 2 of the chicks are interested in Una, or if she's interested in them. But I'm not really sure if she even knows what they are, or if she even really cares. I have given it my best go, though. You can see she's looking up at me as if saying, I haven't any idea what this loud thing is, but please take it away. So maybe when it's a bit bigger, she'll be more interested in it. We'll see. Now, of course, because I hatched chicks, I couldn't help but be inspired by them. And so I took some funny video of chicks in the teacup, and inspired me to do a sketch. So here you can see me sketching away. And as I usually do, I do a really rough sketch first, and then here I'm adding the, this is sort of like the second layer of sketch, where I've shut off the first layer, which was basically just circles and shapes, where I'm also trying to really rough in a shape here, kind of get the idea of where the darks and the lights might go. And then here, this is the third layer where I shut off the previous layer, and now I sort of have, this is kind of like the outlined rough sketch layer, also in pencil. And then I come in with chalky pastels and just kind of play with color. So at this phase I'm just playing with color and trying to decide how I should like it to be once it becomes a final piece. But I do still enjoy this rough aspect of a rough outlined sketch and then playing with pastels and colors. So, and of course, yellow looks perfect with blue. So blue and white cup with yellow in, I couldn't help mix those things together. And this is just me playing with lights and shadows. And it's just, I really do enjoy having the multiple layers when I'm sketching digitally. It gives that special, that sort of extra bit of a bonus that I don't get when I'm sketching directly on paper. And I do still sketch on paper and do still paint with actual paint as well, but I do find it's much easier to just, it's not as easier to do, but it's easier mess-wise and easier with layers. So I enjoy it, and of course playing with yellow in the background. So what I think I might do with this sketch when I'm done is I think I'll probably finish it up, make it into some sort of a finished piece that I will then put on things, but then I'm also going to use it as a study to make into another larger painting. And I'm actually considering this week sketching out a lady holding this cup with the chicks in. I thought that might be kind of fun. So look for that this coming week in my next vlog. I'll probably be sharing a sketch of some woman I've dreamt up holding this cup of chicks. I thought it'd be kind of interesting. And then just for fun, I might as well show you the video of it afterwards, which inspired me with this. I did take some video of the chicks, and I thought it would be fun to see them in the cup. So they're pretty adorable. The next morning, getting up, after we've had a few days of warm weather, is when our icy day started. And you can see the ice. I'm not sure if you can tell through here, but the sun was already starting to rise, and so I was looking at my vintage magazines and then trying to get a shot through the window. You can see how the bay isn't moving. In the distance you can see it moving, but up front, which looks like a bit of snow, is actually just a frozen thin layer of ice on top of the sea. So I think that's a great segue into us heading down and looking at how the ice responds to the sea salt after a few days of freeze. I can share with you a new aspect of living on the New England Sea. We had our lovely walk in our last vlog, and it was just above freezing, so it was a warm temperature. We walked through the lovely soft snow in just our jumper. And today it's freezing, and for the past 2 days it's been about 8 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning to about 20 at the highest. And because of that, not sure if you can see, but the beach is littered with crispy salt, ice, and as you look out, that is not just the sea surface you see reflecting the spitting rock. That is sheets of ice. It has to be quite cold to freeze up bits of the sea. There's old Mr. Moon shining down on us. Now, we'll probably get warmer weather in a few days and this will break up and move out, and that will be the end of it. Although you can just see Algae's spitting rock, but Algae is nowhere to be seen. He's off wherever seagulls go to keep warm. Well, most of our snow has melted the next day when it was warmer, but now we're on the second day of our ice cold freeze. It was 7 Fahrenheit this morning. And you can see how the salt water is like slush. See how it freezes on the top? And then the wave and the tide pushes out a little cluster. And then the liquid bit rushes in underneath. It really is a beautiful sight, but so cold and so quiet of birds. I haven't seen a seagull this morning, or a duck, or a goose. Algae did not come to his flat rock today. And would you blame them? How could the duck swim in that? So it's meant to be icy cold for the next 2 days, so the warmer sea will push under, the top will freeze, it will recede, and make little eddies and circles of frozen disks. The birds will stay in their warm, hidden bits in the trees and in the salt hay. And hopefully, by the coming week, we're meant to have warm weather again. Well, New England winter warm. I just heard a goose in the distance. But normally by this time they've flown in, or they've awakened from down here on our shore, breakfasted, swim across their, I call it the morning commute. They wake up here, work their way across the harbor to the neighbor's yard. And for years they tried these different flags and things to keep the geese out of the yard. I think they gave up. They're never here in the winter, so. But the geese go in and eat up all the grass and stuff. And the moon is still holding on. It's not quite 8 yet. You can see the sun working hard to help heat up the sea. Now when this recedes, there will be icy fairy fields. Well, another frosty New England day here at Bunny Hall. Even the old shells and seaweed are like rocks, and the rocks in the water are wearing their icy winter hats. Well, I hope you're not bored of the scenery around here, but as I mentioned, every day you wake up, it's a new scene, a new view. Day 3 of single-digit temps. Nary a shorebird to be seen. They come later once the high tide comes back through. And you can see how icy it is. I love when it's chilly enough, such as it is today, that the salt water left from the receding tide freezes up. Now, sometimes it's in big pools or puddles here on the shore, but sometimes it's like little magic icy fairy flowers, while there aren't little rivulets of water left. Although I suppose there are some here. There you see ice water. Not that frozen, but slushy, as ice salty water will be. But look at the beauty of that. Isn't it like a field of magic? Diamond flowers. Now, if you were a fairy or a magical being, wouldn't you just want to set up house here? Your gardening would already be done. See how the sun sparkles and catches it? See how this piece is just bent, and these pieces just moving in the icy, salty air. But when one is bundled up appropriately, then one pretend they're walking through a field of diamond-tipped grasses on a warm summer's day, instead of quite freezing, icy New England midwinter's day. So I just wanted to share that beautiful icy moment with all of you and see how the sun catches along the top of it. And of course, look how magical. The rocks with the globules of seaweed and kelp lying prostrate, waiting for the sea to return and to invigorate it and set it upright again. But for now, it's like an icy green blanket covering the rocks. Field of diamonds. Well, thank you for joining me for this week's video. I did try to go to an antique shop this week, but unfortunately, even though they were supposed to be open, they were shut. But we'll try that next week. But I had fun using outdoor summer perennials and bringing them in to give us a hope for spring with some bulbs. It was fun to do artwork as well. And yes, I'm kind of getting into my new weekly schedule of posting once a week, which I think I'll stick with for now, but you never know, I could change it up. And then of course I just want to say a special thank you to my new patrons and all my patrons, which I haven't many, but I'm happy for those I have. And it's a new venture for me, so I'm kind of excited to see how that works out as well. The whole YouTube share your life online journey is quite interesting, so we'll see what happens as the 2021 continues onward. But I'll see the rest of you at chats this week, and I'll see you on my video next week on Saturday. And for my patrons, I'll see you daily in our little virtual village where we chat whenever we like. And I'll have another video for you as well. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me this week. And I will see you next Saturday or in the chats. And remember, stay creative.